3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
A quorum and call the Metro Council business meeting to order. I will ask our clerk, Georgia Linga, to please call the roll for attendance.
Councillor Nolan.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present. Good morning.
Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Present.
And Acting Council President Wong.
Present. Thank you. Okay, let's start with public communications. I will now open public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures that we will use for public communications?
Yes, if you're testifying on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted as a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes. The timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, there are timers located on the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And Acting Council President Wong, we do have some folks who have signed up to testify.
Okay.
The first person is Dick Scouten, and you can choose any of those 4 spots here.
For the record, my name is Dick Scouten, and I'm a former Washington County Commissioner. I live at 15410 Southwest Heron Court in Beaverton. Acting Council President and members of the Council. I'm here today representing a group informally known as the Cooper Mountain Group. The Cooper Mountain Green Spaces target area is by far the oldest metro target area that has not reached its aspirational target acreage. So it's time for us to get much closer to the targeted acreage for Cooper Mountain. Speaking as a former local elected, you and I both know, number one, how important it is to keep promises, whether explicit or implicit, made to the voters who have approved our bond measures. Number two, just how satisfying it is when an opportunity presents itself to meet the promises of a bond issue and then to realize those promises. And particularly with green spaces and park acquisitions, they are such feel-good successes and are overwhelmingly good politics. Thanks for your time and attention, and just as a postscript, I have some extra hard copies of our group's handout if that would be useful to Metro Attorney or Chief Operating Officer or anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can take those copies here. Next, we have Susan Hartnett.
Good morning, Acting President Wong and councilors. For the record, my name is Susan Hartnett. I'm here today to provide comments on the 2024 Oregon Zoo Bond and the recently released early audit by Metro Auditor Brian Evans. I was here last week for Auditor Evans' presentation, the zoo management response, and the Metro Council's discussion. Some of what I heard here last week may have been concerning to members of the public, which prompted me to come back today. I would note that my comments run close to 5 minutes, and I hope that you will allow me to complete them. While I am providing comments to you, my message is directed to the Metro Region's voters. My message is a simple one. Like me, every voter in the region should feel confident that the zoo management and zoo bond team will effectively and successfully deliver all promises made to the voters in the 2024 ballot measure. You might ask why the voters of the Metro region should give any credence to my reassurances. First, from my 30 years of public sector employment as a program and project manager, including facilities and construction management, I know when a public program is working well and when it is not. I also have a deep relationship with the Oregon Zoo. It began in 2014 when I was invited to join the 2008 Zoo Bond Citizen Oversight Committee. I participated on that committee for 7 years, including 4 years as the final chair. Through my work on the Oversight Committee, I came to understand and admire the commitment and professionalism of the Oregon staff, zoo staff, and management, and the bond program team. It would be an understatement to simply say I was very impressed. As chair, I led the Oversight Committee's work to produce our final report to the Metro Council and community in November of 2021. The report gathered historic information about the program management and approaches at the heart of the 2008 bond success and detailed the projects completed with the bond funds. The report states, quote, "The committee is pleased to report that throughout the 13 years since the bond measure was approved by the voters in November 2008, the bonds funds were spent wisely, bond projects were completed on schedule and within budget, and the bond program successfully delivered on voter expectations." Some of you may have heard me say that before. The report also included recommendations on early work to support the potential for another bond and noted that the 2008 bond program and its processes should serve as an example for local governments who are entering into a bond program. As the work of the Oversight Committee came to a close, I wanted to continue to support the zoo and join the Oregon Zoo Foundation's Board of Trustees in 2022. I am still a trustee, and I will be moving into a board leadership track next year, which includes a further 6-year commitment to that organization. I am not speaking on behalf of the foundation, however, today. In late 2023, when the idea of another zoo bond ballot measure was being contemplated, I formed and chaired a political action committee to advocate for its passage with the region's voters. As you know, that bond passed in May 2024 with support by almost 54% of the voters. I know that the success of the 2008 bond contributed to that successful outcome. I know the early audit of the 2008 bond helped put appropriate controls and processes in place, which were vital to the success of the 2008 bond. I know those controls and processes are still in place and are being improved upon for the 2008 bond projects. I assume that the early audit of the 2008 bond was undertaken in the same spirit as the early audit of the 2008 bond, and that these new recommendations, which have been fully embraced by the zoo and bond program management, will support the success of the 2008 zoo bond program. I know that the 2004 Zoo Bond Citizen Oversight Committee has been formed, is meeting, and is composed of thoughtful, knowledgeable people who understand their role in assuring the region's voters that the bond money we are entrusting to the zoo will be spent wisely, the bond projects will be completed on schedule and within budget, and that the bond program will successfully deliver on the voter expectations. I want the voters of the metro area to know that I have every confidence that Metro leadership, the Oregon Zoo staff and management, the 2024 Zoo Bond program team, and the Zoo Bond Citizen Oversight Committee will work tirelessly to fully and responsibly deliver everything promised to the voters, just as they did for the 2008 bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in and all your service to the zoo.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Nicholas Prim.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Prim. I just have a quick little message about the Lloyd Center, how it sits on one of the most transit-rich sites in the region, and Metro's own 2040 growth concept designates the Lloyd District as part of the Central City Regional Center. The current master plan for the Lloyd Center entitles demolition of 29 acres in that district with no binding construction timeline, no public development partner, and no affordable housing commitment. The OMSI district is the same scale, same code section, same architect, but required Prosper Portland as a public partner, a city council resolution, and $15.4 million in public investment, including Metro bond participation. The Lloyd Center has none of that. We're asking whether Metro believes that the standards should apply consistently to regional centers, sites such as the Lloyd Center. That's all.
Thank you. Next we have Next we have Matt Henderson.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Matt Henderson. I'm here again representing the Save Lloyd campaign. We are a coalition of community members and concerned citizens advocating not just against the loss of Lloyd Center for nostalgic reasons, but for a transformational community entertainment and reuse hub like nothing before seen in our city. Some of you have received outreach letters from me personally within the past week. Our outreach is based on our awareness that Metro has within its strategic plan a concept for a reuse mall in Portland. We have recently gone so far as to tag Metro in our social media posts. Whether this is effective outreach strategy is unclear. We are still learning how to best interact with our regional leadership. With this said, we come today not as a loosely knit collective, but as a recently established nonprofit with an invigorated board and a base of supporters and over 10,000 signatures between two petitions, our Save Lloyd Mall campaign petition and the Save Lloyd Ice Coalition petition. Many of these voices are dissatisfied with the plan to send upwards of 100,000 tons of debris to the landfill in exchange for a gravel lot super block with no one signed on to build the pretty buildings from the renderings. Not to mention the complete overriding of a Portland landmark that still serves many diverse interests in our city and has proven to support community in new, compelling ways. My hope is that our initiative to gather these voices of thousands of everyday Portlanders will be enough to warrant us a 30-minute meeting with Metro to discuss our proposal specifically geared towards Metro about Lloyd Center, and particularly a segment of Lloyd Center, being an exceptional opportunity for Metro and for Portland. If such a potential exists, we would eagerly extend ourselves in whatever way to facilitate a meeting in person or remotely. Thank you so much for all you do, for your time, and for the opportunity to speak.
And I know we've been in email communication. I'll reach back out.
Yes, thank you. I got a couple response emails from you, and we'd appreciate that very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt. That is the last of our public testimony for today.
Okay, with that, we'll close public testimony and move on to our consent agenda. We have 3 items on today's consent agenda, starting with resolution number 26-5609 for the purpose of changing certain council committee assignments for 2026. Resolution number 26-5610 for the purpose of appointing Jody Carson and Chelsea Vincente Shilo.
Yep, Sheila.
Good. To the Future Vision Commission, and consideration of the April 30th, 2026 council meeting minutes. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Acting President Wong, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. It's moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Simpson. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Okay, the consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll move on to our presentations. We'll start with the 2026 Economic Development Activities Roadmap. Our first item today is a presentation about Metro's economic development priorities. Council has given direction over the past year to prioritize this work, and today's presentation is one of many we will receive throughout the rest of the year. There are three major bodies of work related to economic development at Metro: Job Ready Lands, an update to the comprehensive economic development strategy, and of course, our own legislative priorities. Given this spread of work, we'll have staff from Planning, Development, and Research, as well as Government Affairs with us today. Joining us are Aaron Key, Urban Policy and Development Manager, and Elisa Kohler, Legislative Affairs Manager, David Tetrick, Economic Development Planner, and Jake Cromwell, Strategic Initiatives Policy Advisor. Welcome to you all.
Good morning, Acting Metro Council President Wong and Metro Council. My name is Erin Key. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Urban Policy and Development Manager in the Planning Department. So thank you very much for having us. We're excited to show you how we've taken your direction that you gave us in Resolution 26-5570 and created three clear work programs that support one another in this work. PD&R and GAPD have a lot of programs starting. Today we are focused on just three work plans, which we're calling together the 2026 Economic Roadmap, because they'll be very active this calendar year. There are more activities we're working on, including the future vision and look backs at the 2040 growth concept and what's resulted from those plans since their inception. But we want to focus on these three programs today and get your feedback on the work plan drafts that we are presenting. Next slide, please. We will review the council direction from that resolution. We will talk about the three components of this 2026 Economic Development Roadmap, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and have a conversation with you about your feedback on these work plans. Next slide, please. I do want to reflect that Metro has a number of important roles in supporting the local economy, and these reach way beyond the three specific work plans that we'll talk about today. Tourism in Greater Portland is an enormous industry with $5.5 billion in 2024. And Metro plays an important role in partnering with Travel Portland, attracting convention groups to the region in the state, bringing 1.7 million visitors annually. Our region's incredible access to nature is sometimes deemed our second paycheck for our residents and employees. And many of us invest in and care for parks and natural areas that add to the economic value of our region. Metro's housing bond supports more than 3,000 construction jobs annually. And our long-range planning and forecasting work and the grants that we provide to local governments support growth in existing commercial corridors and inside the UGB. And we've worked as a convener and a partner to secure job growth, advance land readiness, and bring forth major transportation investments over time. Next slide. But today, we're going to focus specifically on Resolution 26-5570 that Metro Council approved in March of this year, directing staff to work on several new programs related to shared prosperity and a strong economy. You can see the language in that resolution here on the slide. We're going to focus our conversation in this roadmap on actions 1, 4, and 5. These are our focus to purposely give you some proposed work plans for these actions so you understand how we're moving these into action as soon as possible. So let's go to the next slide and focus on those three. You will see in this schedule how they all overlap in 2026 and why we consider them a roadmap. There are three important pieces, and the team that's convened here today will talk about each in turn. First is the SEDS update, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and David will talk about that in just a minute. Followed by Job Ready Land, an important new program laid out in the resolution, which we'd like to define, and Jay will talk about that work plan today. And then the third is a state legislative priority development, and Annalisa from GAPD is here to talk about that. You'll see that the Job Ready Land program starts at the same time with the other three, but continues past it into the next year. You are going to get an update on the work plans for each of these, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. We're looking for opportunities to use existing Metro committees and plug in the expertise of Metro's partners as we plan for good coordination across not just our departments, but across Metro. You'll likely get updates on these three different work plans individually as they move forward, so that you have those feedback points at important parts of each of these processes. For example, when it comes to SEDS, you might likely get an update before you at a future council meeting or work session as an update on that process as it goes along. At your request, we can invite GPI to come here and to share information about their progress. Next slide, please. I do want to talk about the fact that this work is guided by Metro's strategic plan to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. The staff you have before you today have been working with DEI staff since initial scoping to get their feedback and direction, and we'll continue to work with them through these processes. We also believe that the roadmap, let me specifically call out goals A and E as particularly important to these work. Also, this work supports two strategic targets from Metro Council, the economy and climate. All right, without further ado, let's dig into it. And we're going to start first with the SEDS. And David Tetrick is here to provide that update. If we go to the next slide, please.
Good morning, Council President Wong, Acting Council President Wong, and Metro Councilors. My name is David Tetrick. I'm the Senior Economic Development and Planning Development and Research on the Urban Policy and Development team. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm happy to be here with you to talk about the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. The SEDS, as we call it, keeps our region eligible for project funding from the Economic Development Administration in the federal government, and represents a key opportunity to strategize as a region on our economic development priorities and our targeted industries. The current 2022 to 2027 SEDS was critical for winning funding for the Mass Timber Coalition, led by Port of Portland, and the PowerEyes Northwest Partnership focused on grid-scale battery energy storage technologies, led by Portland State University. Greater Portland Inc., or GPI, is leading this work and has selected a consultant team led by Civic Solutions, a firm based in Austin, Texas. One of the partners of that firm, Steve Pedigo, has worked in our region for a long time. He was actually working with GPI back in 2008, and he worked on the previous SEDS as well, the 2022 to 2027. Camille Trummer, a local community engagement and facilitation specialist, will be leading engagement with project stakeholders as part of this project team. Per the council resolution, Metro staff is supporting this project with technical assistance and funding. I'm working closely with Nolan Douglas, the GPI's community development manager, to advance the project and see it to its scheduled completion in December 2026. Civic Solutions brings a strong background of working with regions to identify their strengths and weaknesses and better understand their target industries, which represent opportunities for growth and which need support to be retained, which is critical as we move forward in this work. The update of those target industry clusters will be a key input into our proposed work plan for Job Ready Lands, which we will turn to now. Next slide, please.
Thanks, David. Good morning, councilors. I'm so excited to be here with you today presenting our proposed work plan for Job Ready Lands. My name is Jay Cromwell. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a strategic initiatives advisor in the planning department, and I've been supporting council's economic development work for the past year. now stepping up and into a project management role for Job Ready Lands on Aaron's team. And just a personal note, I'm so thrilled and grateful to be here with you today in the new capacity. I've been with y'all in several capacities since the pandemic, and this is my first time presenting to council, so it's very exciting. Nice. Okay, back to the work. The proposed Job Ready Lands program is an effort to close the gap between existing vacant industrial lands and the needs businesses have in order to utilize that land for jobs. We've heard from our local jurisdictional business and nonprofit partners that there are roadblocks to converting vacant land into quality job creating industries, and this is an effort to close those gaps and remove those roadblocks. This effort will better understand what land we have and to help identify the steps to make more industrial land ready for development. I'm going to walk you through our proposed process, but before I do that, I want to take a moment to highlight the key deliverables for this program. We're proposing to focus on 3 main deliverables. The first is an employment land inventory. This will be an interactive map that will be hosted online and available to the public. The map will have data layers that can be turned off and on for different land characteristics, such as size and slope and other things. We believe this interactive map will help our partners filter their own sites using criteria that is most fitting for their individual needs. The second deliverable is a list of available industrial sites in the region with 3 to 6 prioritized sites specifically identified for case study work. And then the third deliverable is a readiness plan, and that's a plan of identified actions, funding, and or investments needed to make the sites ready. So next slide, please. So we are proposing 4 phases for this work. In phase 1, which is the phase on the left, we will gather information, mostly and most importantly, updating the existing industrial land inventory. So you'll see that work happen right at the beginning and be available for our partners and the public right at the beginning of this work. We'll also gather information from CEDS, as David said, including target industries. David is also recently completing the workforce gap analysis. We'll include some of that work as well. We will also conduct a summary of local economic opportunity analyses, and we will also collect data qualitatively through jurisdictional interviews with our partners to understand what their site priorities are as well. In phase 2, we'll work with a consultant that we have not yet identified and regional partners to identify land characteristics needed by the region's target industries and to use those to prioritize a few areas for a regional readiness effort. We will do this with partners at the table and are proposing to work with a subcommittee of MTAC, which is the Metro Technical Advisory Committee, which has representatives from cities and counties, the DOT, service providers, including water, sewer, parks, and schools, the Port and TriMet, private development organizations, land use, environmental, health, and housing advocacy organizations, and among others. We are also proposing that work come through the MTAC, MPAC, and council committee and decision-making structure. As we move on to phases 3 and 4, our next steps get a little bit fuzzy, which is why they're outlined in dashed lines, because Metro staff will be creating the container for the process of the work, but partners will be leading this work. Phase 3 will be bringing the right partners together to work on outlining a readiness plan and endorsing the 3 to 6 site recommendations for the benefit of the entire region. Regional alignment on just a few sites is at the heart of this phase, and we need a readiness plan to outline the steps for getting sites ready for development. This is the phase where we'll build coalitions and seek resources. And then finally, phase 4, which is implementation and marketing. Phase 4 is when partners and Metro do the work to make the sites ready and then market those sites to companies we want to attract. Again, this will not be done by Metro, but will be done by partners in coordination with Metro, including GPI, Business Oregon, and others with expertise in marketing. Thank you very much, and I'll now turn the presentation over to Annalisa.
Next slide, please. Good morning, Acting Council President Wong and Metro Councilors. My name is Annalisa Curler. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Metro's Legislative Affairs Manager. I'm excited to be here today this morning to talk to you about our state legislative priority development for this area. So as I think you are all aware, over the past few years, there has been growing concerns that Oregon lacks certain types and sizes of development-ready industrial land for current employers to expand to and new employers to come to Oregon. Most recently, we saw both the Oregon Semiconductor Competitive Task Force and the Oregon Clean Energy Task Force both identify the lack of shovel-ready sites as a key barrier to the success for these critical industries in Oregon. In response, down in Salem in the Oregon legislature, we have seen the legislature contemplate changes both to Oregon's land use system as well as funding to help address these issues. So this has included things like time-limited gubernatorial supersiding authority, bringing land directly into Metro's urban growth boundary, flipping rural reserves to urban reserves in Washington County, as well as substantive additional funding for both industrial site readiness and brownfields. So we are certainly anticipating that industrial land and Oregon's land use system will continue to be a focus of the Oregon legislature in the 2027 session. So staff has outlined a process similar to one that we followed for in anticipation of the 2025 transportation package to bring a series of work sessions before you over this summer and into the fall to really prepare you all for these conversations. The intention of these work sessions are really twofold. First, to ensure that council is grounded with the latest information about industrial land issues facing our state and our region, really trying to develop that shared analysis amongst council, as well as for council to share perspectives and priorities to guide legislative solutions. You'll see up there a series of work sessions that we have currently mapped out. I'm going to go through each of them to give you a little bit more detail. I think the real question that we have for you today is, what's missing, or if there are within each of these categories things that you want to make sure are highlighted or touched on. That would be very important feedback for us as staff to get. So the very first work session will be happening in early June. We've been working on it with our DEI team, and in that one, we are really hoping to ground ourselves in understanding the current racial and other inequities that exist in Oregon's economy. Really wanted to start out with that foundational piece. In July, we plan to dive into questions around the need for industrial land supply. So we hope to bring forward presentations that explore how business recruitment and retention strategies work in our region and our state. And then we will do a deep dive into the connections between those strategies and traded sector land supply. We are really hoping to explore what types of land businesses are looking for and what are the current barriers and successes. In the fall, we're going to do a deep dive into two specific industries, agriculture and data centers. We want to bring a panel that will do an overview and focus on the importance of the agricultural industry in the three-county region. We want to ensure that you understand the current challenges and opportunities that exist for that industry, specifically around land. And then additionally, want to bring a panel on data centers. Obviously, this has been a very hot topic, both in the region and in the state. And we want to bring forward experts to walk us through the benefits and cost of data centers, why businesses need them, and the water, energy, and land use implications. In consultation with our Tribal Affairs program, we are also planning to invite tribal partners to bring their perspectives on data centers as well. And then finally, we want to look kind of internally here at Metro and explore how industrial land has been utilized in Metro's UGB. We want to discuss successes, failures, lessons learned, and spend a little bit of time on who gets to make what decisions. So what really is in Metro's span of control, what is in city and county spans of control, and what the private market controls. And throughout all of these presentations, I think what staff is really looking for is what your reflections are and your key takeaways are from these presentations that you would like to see carried through to potential policy solutions, changes, and conversations. Thank you. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back over to Erin, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. So we have presented to you overviews of work plans for the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the Job Ready Land Program, and this legislative set of presentations and deliberations by the Metro Council. So we're very interested in engaging with you in a conversation now, answering your questions. We're very interested in what success looks like for you in these 3 programs and what other information or actions you'd like us to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you for presentations. Colleagues, start with Councilor Simpson.
Thank you so much, Acting Council President Wong. That's a long, I just want to say President Wong. Can I say that? Thank you so much, Aaron, Jay, David, Annalisa. I see you back there, Malou and Catherine. I know y'all's fingerprints are all over this, so thank you so much. Really happy to see the work plan that y'all have created. For me, it hits all the points. I think if I had anything to add to it, I would say work closely with our JPAC table, working closely with Councilor Lewis, so that we can make sure transportation issues are encapsulated in this work as we talk about climate and our economy. Really quick, I know you had a slide up there with 2 buckets that had dotted lines around because it's still kind of in the nebulous. And I think part of that nebulous for me is helping the public understand what GPED is, or Greater Portland Economic Development District, because that will be the main players at those next 2 phases. So could you talk a little bit about GPED to the public?
Well, I'll be happy to introduce GPED, and then I'll turn it to colleagues to talk about how GPED could feature in any of these work plans. The Greater Portland Economic Development District is led by a board of members representing a variety of interests in the region. So Metro is actually represented on the board by Malou Wilkinson, our Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research. It is led by Adrian Chalet as board chair, who represents economic development in Washington County, and a number of other members representing educational institutions, public sector partners, private sector partners, and all of those interests are represented on that board. As we have structured it currently, GPED is housed within and staffed by Greater Portland, Inc. And so Greater Portland, Inc. and GPED are to an extent interchangeable when it comes to the SEDS. For instance, GPED is the board that would actually approve the SEDS. GPI is staffing and leading that work as well. Turn it to Jay. Aaron?
Great. Yeah, I'm going to pick up the second one. Georgia, maybe you can go back to the slide that had the several boxes. I think it might be slide 9. Thank you. Yeah, you were talking about the further off actions and the ones we know less about. So the whole goal of this is to have shovel-ready land in the metro area ready to go. That's going to likely take some investment, some actions by both ourselves and our partners. So these further steps involve partners, as you've pointed out, in getting that shovel-ready land ready, as well as moving it into a place where we're ready to market it to companies that might be interested in moving to Oregon from outside of the state. And GPI is one organization that does marketing of sites to outside of our region, and so that could be one player in that. We need to identify who those partners are and who's got the capacity and interest in helping us market those sites once they're ready to go.
Absolutely. And I guess part of this too is like the nebulous is industry analysis, because success to me is every 3 to 6 properties we put up within a 24-month, 36-month time span, they're developed, and we're moving on to the next 3 to 6. And so, that's success to me. That means we're moving, we're rolling, people are working, we're rocking and rolling. Thank you for those explanations. I really appreciate it. I'm pretty sure my colleagues will have a lot more to tear apart on this, so I'll leave it to them.
Thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks. Well, agree. I want to say thanks for bringing this work forward. I know that the council has really wanted to steward this. One of the things that I've been hearing a lot from folks in the community, but also trying to address some of our local realities, is that I think for decades our region we looked to the future and saw growth, saw opportunities just abundant. And right now our region is not exactly in that position. And so I think it's the perfect place for Metro to be, to build, I think, a new muscle, because for a long time we were here to help manage that growth, and now we need to help build the growth with our partners. This is fantastic work. One question I do have, and I am a board liaison to Westside Economic Alliance. So I do want to ask, I know a few weeks ago they made a presentation to us around, quite a significant amount of recommendations around industrial land readiness and kind of also urban growth report stuff. So I'm kind of wondering from the staff work plan, how we are going to be building in kind of the regional experts, the regional partners that have also try to lean in and support us in this kind of bigger picture, this bigger work that we're doing. I know that this specific Job Ready Lands work is a result of our economic development work group, but there's multiple pieces of work, so I want to make sure that we land the plane on that.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to start on that one.
Yep.
I think I'd really like to highlight that one of the products that Jay focused on, the industrial land inventory, is something that WEA's group really was very interested in, is having a good inventory of the land that is available and what its site characteristics are. And they were very interested in having information about different site characteristics. And we think this product is going to have an ability to provide those and give folks not only a lot of information about sites, but the ability to sort hundreds and thousands of sites by particular characteristics. So we could find out how many sites there are in the region that are over 20 acres, for instance, or that are between 5 and 16 acres, whatever folks are very interested in. So that's something that I hope that group will be very happy with seeing. I also want to highlight the ways in which the second phases of working to prioritize what sites we want to, as a region, focus on is a regional conversation that is going to require a lot of collaboration, partnership, and agreement. We need to focus ourselves so that we can reach the goals that Councillor Simpson's talked about, which is moving those sites quickly into production. That's why we have to focus on a small number of sites as a region, and figuring out where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck is going to require the kind of dialogue and conversation that I think you're talking about, Councillor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. I do think that one of the parts of my question that I don't quite think that you answered, but I want to kind of try and repose it, is, we did have a few recommendations framed to the council. And I know that there's been a few transitions on our end as well, that we've been trying to keep up with things. But I do think it's important for us to have the mindset to also think about that work that was presented to us in addition to the work that you're doing. I think we should also have a general sense of a timeline for that. So, but anyway, I just want to also affirm that this work is fantastic, and appreciate y'all's effort.
Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, and I say thank you, Chair, simply because it's too long to say thank you, Acting Deputy Dunn, as Councilor Simpson pointed out. So I just say thank you, Chair. First of all, I had the opportunity the other night to attend the economic development presentation at the city of Sherwood, and it was nice to hear a really positive, good news kind of story. And they had very good things to say about Metro staff and working with Metro on developing data and looking at things. So I thought that was came away with, everybody was happy. This isn't usual. So at any rate, and I'm glad we're developing both of the Jobs Ready inventory and the SEDS. Comprehensive, complex thing, and it involves at least 4 things that I can think of. You can probably think of more. It involves, as you mentioned, the workforce. It involves the job ready lands. It involves the educational components, and it involves the tax structure. I'm not going to get into the tax structure. That could take us all day. But I have 2 specific questions. I think the job-ready lands thing is very important. I want to know, one question is, will we identify whether or not we need lands larger than 100 acres? There are very limited industrial types that need huge lands. I can think of several, but that has been one of the questions of the recent bill that involved adding, say, 1,700 acres. It's a lot of land. It involves a whole bunch of sites. Will we set a top limit on, do we need 1,000-acre sites? Is that something that is really necessary for our economic development? That's one question. And the other question has to do with what David mentioned, is the economic, or the jobs ready thing. I heard that it was very difficult for educational districts to develop apprenticeship programs because of limits in the state legislation. I'm wondering if we're going to weigh in on trying to create either a statewide apprenticeship program, make it easier. Hillsborough had to go through a great number of hoops to get their apprenticeship program going in the high school level. And it strikes me that we could do this, we could either support state changes at state legislature to do this, or we could actually do it on a regional level perhaps. And I'm just wondering if this is something that we will be looking at.
I think I can answer both of those. For this purpose, the workforce is an input. The workforce analysis is an input that's going to be really important to focusing on the kind of industries that are going to be the most successful for the prioritization of those sites. We have to have a focus on what kind of industries we think need those sites, who's going to be most successful, where we have the workforce. So that's how the workforce research is an input into the process. Further actions that could come from that workforce strategy, I think, are topics for the council to discuss separately.
Okay.
And then there was another.
The question on the limits on the kinds
Yes,
of.
on the size. Yes, thank you very much.
Size limits on the kinds of lands that we might need.
Yeah, no, we're not going in with any preconceived notions about limits or what kind of sites are needed. That is the purpose of the work plan, is to have that dialogue and conversation, get feedback from our consultants, take input from our local jurisdictions about their needs, look at their EOAs, and to use the targeted industries information coming out of the SEDS to have a dialogue at our organizations to talk about how we focus on types of land that's needed. So we're coming into this with no set expectations.
But will we identify the kinds of industries that could require large land tracts? I mean, there's only a limited number, for example. I mean,
I'm sure that will be part of the
plants or
conversation.
manufacturing airplanes or, certain kinds of oil industry things. I mean, will we identify that as a component of the kinds of, whether or not we actually are looking at those as priority industries for this area?
We're not ruling any industries out.
That's a little different than the question I asked.
Okay.
Will we be identifying those that could need large as a separate segment?
I think we'll be having conversations about industries that will have a variety of land needs, and that will be the dialogue, is to focus on how we want to, where we want to focus, where we want to put our energy.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. First, I want to drill in on the employment land inventory. It's obviously important that we do an inventory that's useful for those of us in the region, but I've been the whole conversation really focused on this inventory being the dynamic set of factors that site selectors are looking for, and I didn't see that really reflected in the language you used today. Can you confirm that we're still aiming for this inventory to be kind of site selector ready?
The inventory is being used as an input to, let me go back for a second. So one of the things from WEA's letter and feedback that we've heard from other partners is that there's a mismatch between the land we have available and the land that our industries need. So it will be great if we inventory the land that we have available and that is useful to folks that want to site their businesses immediately. But our anticipation is that these sites need investment and work on them. So we either need to work with partners to bring together several sites to make one site large enough to be attractive and shovel-ready. Perhaps they need to be leveled. Perhaps they have environmental contamination that needs to be cleaned up. Perhaps there's wetland mitigations or wetland delineations. So there's a lot of different actions or investments that need to happen on some of this land to make it shovel-ready and ready to be advertised, which is why those kind of later steps in the work plan were fuzzed out, is because we know there's going to be a lot of work identified in that readiness plan that will have to then be conducted before those sites can be ready to be kind of advertised and made available as shovel-ready sites. So the inventory itself is really a starting place to understand what we have and to really get a clear understanding of that mismatch. And that's exactly what WEA asked of us, is to provide that kind of information. And that's why we're starting with that step.
I understand that from a government who keeps good data perspective. What I'm not understanding is how we had a lot of momentum around making a work product that would probably not be produced in-house. We would need to get somebody connected to Site Selector Guild or something. That is the dynamic list, because it's advantageous for us to be able to give it in the format that national site selectors use. So if we've backed away from that, I guess I just want us to say it clearly, and then I will offline follow up with when that decision was made.
I wonder, can we go back to that same slide that we went back to a few minutes ago? And let's just talk through the steps a little and see if we can get clarity on it. But we start with an inventory of just what we have with the information that we have available. And then we work with kind of all those inputs as well in the blue areas, the local EOAs and all of this, to understand what industries we want to target and what those site needs that they have. And then work through collaboration in phase 2 to prioritize a few sites, 3 to 6 sites. So I think my understanding of what you're talking about is in phase 4 with the investment in marketing, where we have sites that are being marketed, they're shovel ready, and that's where we need the partnership with organizations. Could be GPI, it could be state organizations who put the information about these sites into these marketing materials and making them available to quickly turn.
I would just say, I think it may have sounded like we ruled out a certification program with Site Selectors Guild, but we haven't at this point. And I think as we move forward, we'll be talking more with partners about the best way to get information about these sites into the hands of people who are making decisions about business expansion and business attraction opportunities.
Yeah, I know we hadn't officially signed on to Site Selector Guild, and that there are kind of competing groups or reasons that's an advantage or a disadvantage, and that's beyond council level decision. I think kicking that down to when we have narrowed in on just 4 or 5 sites and that they are shovel ready, it's too far, it's too late. I think there are people coming to town now, and if we're not able to honestly tell them what we have, even if it's not shovel ready, even if we are saying, look, here are still the barriers, it's not the level of meeting the immediate need that I thought we were going for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Lots of interesting stuff in this presentation and in the conversations I've had with the team before this. And I will just identify the issues. I'll ask for feedback if it's direct. Target industries. What's the selection process? Who agrees to support whatever targeted industries are selected? Do we have a consortium or something among cities, counties, state agencies, chambers of commerce, educational institutions to support whatever a target industry is selected or industries?
Yes, so I'll speak a little bit on behalf of Greater Portland Inc. and the SEDS project, but I want to recognize that we are not in the lead on that project. So I'm happy to refer that question to Monique Claiborne, President and CEO of GPI, as well for her response. But as it's scoped in the project currently, the target industry clusters would be decided on by regional stakeholders, both public and private sector, through engagement efforts throughout the course of this, the rest of this calendar year, in addition to informed by data like concentrations of industries in our region, the availability of sites to support different regional opportunities in particular industries, and our workforce and our ability to provide the kinds of talent that different businesses and different industries need to thrive in our region.
So what body or bodies selected?
They've scoped this to have several committees weigh in on this that are still being decided on. So I can't give you an exact number of names right now, but they are considering several committees who would be weighing in on this throughout the process. And then Greater Portland Economic Development District and that board would be the final vote on approving the target industries and the SEDS overall.
Thanks. I appreciate knowing that. And when we look at targeting industries, how are we assuring that we don't select the shiniest, brightest ball in the collection and go after industries that every other metropolitan area is going after, which to me is almost certain to be an unsuccessful strategy. If everyone's going after them and is willing to have a race to the bottom in terms of tax giveaways and deregulation and things like that, I don't see that as a winning strategy for Oregon or for the Portland metro area. How do we prevent that?
I think it's through regional conversations about what our priorities are for economic development. For instance, in the previous SEDS, climate technology was included because it both was an opportunity to leverage our incredibly innovative workforce and our innovative companies in this region, but it also spoke to our values. And so I think that regional conversation is going to take place. And there's no perfect way to prevent any region or any city or any jurisdiction chasing the bright, shiny object, as you put it. So it's always a challenge for us to be both aspirational and realistic.
Mm-hmm. And as we take it down to more specific things and look at selected sites, can someone here help me understand or believe that we're not putting government's thumb on the scale? If we're picking 5 to 6 sites in the region out of hundreds of sites that have willing sellers, how do we make sure that the return on investment for the community in putting public resources into this effort is at least as big as the return on investment for the land seller?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Councilor Nolan, and one that is going to be part of this process. We imagine a set of evaluation criteria that are built by our partners with us, working with MTAC, a committee of MTAC, MPAC, and with the Metro Council to ask these challenging questions. That's where we hope to have this consultant involved to get those evaluation criteria right, so that there's a process that selects those sites, and it's not random or a popularity contest, but instead we're really baking our values and our needs into those criteria that give us information. I think that's going to be a critical place for the council to weigh in on the Job Ready Land program, is in those steps of prioritization to kind of ask these difficult questions and then have that dialogue.
This, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge just this one last thread, it connects to a priority I have, that we should be investing our time, energy, wisdom, resources to economic development that reinvests in the community through good corporate citizenship, but also I really am interested in not just job generation, but wealth generation. Local families should be able to build businesses here, like Phil Knight in his garage, like Columbia Sportswear, in a garage, stitching together sweatshirts and shoes. Somehow we need to be creating an atmosphere that supports them. Who knew which garage was going to produce two global companies? But let's try to really seek that out.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also, if I could, I'd really like to reflect again too on what I was just saying about the engagement of those different groups. I talked at the beginning about wanting to focus on some of our existing committees that we have at Metro. So we've talked about, Jay presented in her presentation about MTAC, creating a committee off of MTAC. So it would be a subcommittee that supplements the participation of the different membership that is in MTAC and provides recommendations to MPAC. So there's that opportunity for political involvement. MTAC is a really large group that has a lot of different seats. It involves it has seats that for the counties and for several of our cities. It's similar to that composition as MPAC, but it's much, much larger and has, in addition to representation from, our government partners, folks like Jamie Stasny, who participated in that presentation from WEA. She has a seat on MTAC, as well as several organizations. So there's private economic development organizations and public economic organizations. We have land use advocacy organizations, environmental advocacy organizations, housing affordability organizations, residential development, commercial and industrial development, green infrastructure, design and sustainability, public health, a lot of those are all separate seats. So there's something like 36 members of that group. So we think that by supplementing with a subcommittee that could then bring in some additional maybe site selector folks that have expertise in industrial development, some of the kind of additional folks that served on that WEA work group could supplement that MTAC committee as a subcommittee and then bring that information back to MTAC. This is where we hope to kind of have the regional alignment that allows us to have both good evaluation criteria, as Councilor Nolan was talking about, to get at those tough issues, but also to make sure we're really considering all of the region's needs and prioritizing sites and figuring out we have something that's going to be able to really benefit from a regional investment and have that kind of buy-in across the region. So that's our intent with the engagement process.
Before we go around again, I have some thoughts and questions too. I think when I had been thinking about this topic, and when I came to speak to the staff, was it last week? I was really mulling about how, this targeted universalism framework could be adapted or deployed. And I know we haven't had that conversation at council or, with staff across the agency, but I think that might be a helpful tool as we kind of frame some of the issues. So I think first, I know what we're trying to do, but it'd be really great to articulate the universal goal that we're trying to accomplish with this. Is it just more jobs? Is it, great jobs and wealth building, as Councilor Nolan alluded to? I think if we can create that kind of North Star framework, that would be really helpful for me. And then, just for myself personally, when I'm not going to be the acting president, I'm going to be representing District 6, which is, Southeast, Southwest Portland. And I'd really like to see more of a nexus. And I think that's one of the beauties of a TU approach is you bring stakeholders in with various different, situatedness, ways of thinking, interests, and we have a broader conversation about what economic development means. For my district, I have very low industrial land to speak of, but what we do have is underutilized urban spaces, like Lloyd Center or, like the Yamsi district. And for me, that's what I'm thinking about for economic development. And one thing that Annalisa, I've been thinking about is what are the different industries that we need to be successful as a region. And it'd be amazing to have another major sector employer with a huge campus. Awesome, we need that. But there's other industries, especially in the urban center, that also play a huge role in our local economy. This council passed a resolution to support the film industry the best we can, and I know that our film, film and TV subsidies run out really quickly because people want to shoot here. And that'd be an interesting part to add to our legislature because we passed that resolution, and it is an important part of the work that we're doing right now in this process of we're to look at land, we're to go after these kind of businesses, but what does it mean to look like to go after businesses, not just on the outskirts of a region, but for city center as well. So I'd like to see just a little bit more kind of holistic approach to that economic development, because we're not going to get out of this just by recruiting a big company. Small business, arts and media, we're all going to have to play a role. What does that look like? And then I think when we're having this industrial land conversation, I get we need to bring in great employers to grow our economy. But I think some of the pushback that we get is, every time we expand the growth boundary, that means there's less money for revitalizing, our city center. I don't know if that's true, but it might be. But I think that's one of the topics that if you could highlight in our upcoming educational series, that's something that I think really deeply about, especially as, the donut hole district in the center. I understand that there's a lot of arguments that if you expand 2,000 acres, something whatever, that means that money won't be invested in, and I don't know if that's true, because I don't think a big company is going to be well, yeah, we're going to put our campus in downtown Portland when we need to, build. So just a little more understanding of what that argument means. It's are we actually diverting resources? Are we bringing money that only would be, invested in this type of way in this type of place? So if we could interrogate a little bit more of that, that would be really helpful for me in those conversations. So no questions, just a bunch of thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to only make one comment, but I'm going to make three. First of all, in response to your comment about reimagining or revitalizing the center, one of the key aspects of that is reimagining in a holistic way the river. I will just point that out. That's something that we're engaged in, but it's something we can do more of. Regarding Councilor Nolan's comments, Oregon already is one of the top 10 and maybe the top 5 in terms of small-scale manufacturing. So one of the things we have to analyze is why we're good and how we can do better in that regard. But then I also have to add an opinion. Someone has to answer the question, and it may be different for different regions of the state, as to whether we're going to go after large tract industrial kinds of businesses, because that will severely impact, as we saw in this most recent bill that was proposed, our land use system. It would require great modifications. We already are there's already pressures to modify it in certain ways, and there's been little gaps proposed. Certain bills were proposed. As you know, there's certain exemptions that can go, that we have and that small cities have. We have to answer that question of whether we really want to compete for large scale, large site things in an area where we have a high value agricultural industry. And my personal feeling is probably not, but that may not be true in the eastern part of the state, the southern part of the state, other parts of the state. The answer could be very different.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I think we are definitely talking about the work plan that was presented for us today, but like part of the foundation for that work plan is the understanding that at the same time we're gonna be moving along with the SEDS process. And I think this SEDS process, we are set up to have to move faster than last time. So David, if you can reflect on the timeline and why we're maybe starting to feel a crunch for the SEDS development.
Yes, GPI worked with partners, including us, to put together the RFP for this round. In the previous 22 to 2027 SEDS, we did have a longer timeline for that project overall. It was a contract held by Metro that was really designed around the Planning Our Future Economy project, and the SEDS was an output of that larger project. So that was part of why we had it scheduled for a month. The other thing that made it a significantly longer timeline previously in putting together the SEDS was a pandemic in the middle of that process, just as it was kicking off. And another project that interrupted that work but also contributed to it was Greater Portland Recovery Plan at the same time, as we were coming out of the pandemic and not seeing the kind of rebound that we were hoping as a region. So there were a significant number of factors that made it a much longer project timeline previously. Every region tackles the SEDS a little bit differently. We are a region that values community engagement and stakeholder engagement very deeply, and I think that's going to be reflected in the project work plan, even if it is on a shorter timeline.
Great, yeah, I just feel like we're asking bigger questions and we have higher expectations than we had last time, but we have to do it faster. So those tensions feel important because they are driving, I think, some of the uncertainty with this work plan.
I think there's room, I will add as well, that the SEDS is a federally compliant document. It's not going to encompass everything that we want to talk about in the region under this current framework. And so following that guidance, coming out of the SEDS, I think there's a lot of opportunity for furthering these conversations that start in this process and continue on as we move forward.
Okay. Well, robust conversation. Thanks for the great work, and we're looking forward to continued updates from you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our resolutions. We'll start with resolution number 265608 for the purpose of adopting the Metro investment policy for fiscal year 25, 26? 26, 27? 25, 26, okay, sorry. Oregon law requires that Metro Council consider and re-adopt an annual investment policy. Our CFO, Brian Kennedy, is here to refresh us on this annual policy and answer questions.
Thank you, Acting Council President Wong, members of the Metro Council. Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer here at Metro, use he, him pronouns. Resolution 26-5608 readopts Metro's investment policy. This is something required annually by ORS 294. If Metro wants to have the ability to invest in securities with maturities longer than 18 months, which we do. So Metro's policy is consistent with the Oregon Short-Term Fund Board guidance. Our policy in its current form has been previously reviewed and approved by the Oregon Short-Term Fund Board. I think it's important to note that Metro's investment policy and the ability to invest out beyond 18 months helps generate interest earnings that expand the impact of voter-approved measures and also provide critical funding for Metro programs and services. I'm happy to answer any questions about the investment policy. The version before you has not changed since last year. And again, this is a step required under Oregon law And so we're bringing it back to you this year, and we'll be back again next year. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal, do you have a question?
Oh, no, man, I forgot to lower it, sorry.
All right, well, seeing no further questions, is there a motion on resolution 26-5608?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Lewis by a hair.
Okay.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Acting Council President Wong.
Aye. The resolution passes unanimously. Thank you, Brian. All right, we'll go to ordinances. This is a first reading and public hearing on ordinance number 26-1542 for purpose of amending Metro Code section 7.05.150 on deficiencies and refunds to extend tax refund filing deadlines for tax years 2021 and 2022 under certain circumstances. Our last piece of legislation today is a first reading of an ordinance related to Metro Supportive Housing Services Tax. Justin Lobsher, our tax compliance program manager, is here to describe the circumstances facing certain taxpayers and the proposed code change. Welcome.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Council President Wong and councilors. Again, I'm Justin Lobsher, Tax Compliance Program Manager with the Revenue and Analytics Division, here to present Ordinance 26-1542, which provides a limited extension to allow certain taxpayers to claim refunds under the SHS personal income tax. And I had some slides.
Should be coming up any moment.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so Metro recently identified that several thousand individuals had their SHS taxes withheld from wages in tax years 2021 and 2022. However, many of these individuals ultimately did not meet the income threshold, and therefore they didn't owe the tax. But because they did not file returns or request refunds, and now the statute of limitations has expired, they currently have no way to recover those overpayments. Next slide, please. So working closely with our tax administrator, the City of Portland Revenue Division, this ordinance creates a narrow targeted solution. It extends the statute of limitations to allow refunds specifically for those 2 tax years, but only in cases where the overpayment resulted from employer withholding. To qualify, taxpayers must file an original return by April of next year, and the provision would repeal then in May of next year. Next slide, please. The intent is to provide relief to this clearly defined group of taxpayers who overpaid but did not owe the tax. It also improves compliance by encouraging filing and does create clear administrative processes. Importantly, this is a very targeted policy. We're not broadly reopening refund timelines. Next slide, please. The financial impacts are expected to be limited. These are prior overpayments rather than any new obligations. The administrator will be proactively notifying the affected individuals, and they're already monitoring similar situations so that we don't have a recurrence with this in future tax years. The implementation can be handled within our existing resources. Next slide, please. Staff recommend approval of ordinance 26-1542. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, Councilors, any questions, comments before we move on to our public hearing? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. This is obviously a fairly technical change, and it's also directed at a fairly narrow set of individuals. Is there a communications plan or way that we're going to be communicating this?
Yeah, the total population is about 14,000, and the city will be doing a very targeted letter campaign to make those folks aware of the opportunity to claim the refund, and then specify, you need to take action by filing return before April of next year.
Will you get a chance to see the letter before it goes out?
Yes, we approve all correspondence before it gets launched.
I've heard from constituents and friends that sometimes the city's communication is not clear and stops short of saying what they're really trying to say. So I would just like your personal assurance that it is going to be clear and easy to understand what action needs to be taken.
Yeah, we'll proofread. We'll have a number of people take a look to make sure it's very concise and clear.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question. Okay, seeing no further questions, I will now open a public hearing on ordinance number 26-1542. Georgia, for anyone joining us, would you please reread the procedures for providing testimony?
Yes, if you are testifying on ordinance number 26-1542, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bring it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, call in your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, their timer is located on the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. I have not received any requests to testify in advance today. I don't see anyone coming up in the audience. Give it a second in the virtual room.
Okay, well, seeing no testimony, I'll close the public hearing. The second reading and consideration of this ordinance was scheduled for May 14th, 2026. Move on to COO Communications.
On? Now I'm on. Okay. Thank you, Acting President Wong. We have two committee updates for you today. First, Director Marcia McGuire, Dr. Marcia McGuire, will be updating us on RWAC, and then Craig Stroud, our General Manager of Visitor Venues, will update us on the MERC meeting yesterday.
Did you say Doctor or Director?
She is Dr.
Okay, cool.
Dr. McGuire.
McGuire.
Not MD, PhD.
Good afternoon, Acting Council President Wong and councilors. It's so great to see you this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. As you know, this committee is a policy level committee that advises on the management of the garbage and recycling system, including the budget and fees that council considers each year. I want to share some feedback on the committee's discussions, but want to note that these themes that I will be sharing are draft and are currently being reviewed by the committee, as we just had our last meeting last week. And we're having them review it this week to make sure that we've accurately captured their input. We will be returning on May 14th for a more in-depth discussion alongside the proposed fees and how we will be applying the committee input we've received as we move forward. Overall, based on the committee's discussion, there is strong alignment with the proposed budget and fees. Committee members expressed support for aligning costs with revenue and improving financial discipline, as well as advancing the system facilities plan and long-term investments. There was support for continued investments in our core regional services and the level of engagement and transparency in the budget process. There was recognition from committee members that the current environment requires difficult decisions and general support for the direction. At the same time, members identified areas for further clarification and alignment. These include greater transparency in fees, cost drivers and forecasting assumptions, a clearer understanding of Metro's agency's central service cost increases and internal efficiency efforts, as well as consideration of transition strategies for the supplemental food scraps funding for local governments, and questions around the timing and phasing of investments. These are constructive inputs that focus largely on clarity, sequencing, and implementation of regional programs and investments. Members also raised several broader concerns. Long-term sustainability of the funding model was a big topic of conversation, particularly reliance on a tonnage-based revenue, affordability and drivers behind fee increases, and the ongoing need to support food scraps policy implementation, as well as the accuracy and variability of tonnage forecasting. So there were a lot of questions around the solid waste forecast and how that is applied. These reflect the broader uncertainty and changes that we're experiencing and working to navigate. I want to highlight that the committee identified several areas where staff can take action, particularly around improving transparency in fees, cost drivers, strengthening forecasting, and long-term planning. At the same time, feedback overall reinforces the importance of maintaining stability, specifically around affordability. Based on that, staff are recommending that we maintain the proposed budget and fee structure as presented without additional changes. As a part of next steps, as I mentioned, the committee is reviewing the report that includes their advisory input, and will incorporate any additional feedback from committee members. On May 14th, next week, we plan to return with a finalized summary of committee input, the proposed fees for adoption, and a more detailed discussion of how staff will be applying and responding to the input that we received from the committee. Based on my preliminary conversations with most of you and the opportunity to present the committee feedback today, we are not planning another work session prior to the fee adoption consideration next Thursday. However, we would be happy to come back next Tuesday if council would like to discuss these issues in more detail. And so that provides my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Very thorough. Colleagues, any questions? Oh, we do have some. Okay, we'll start with Councilor Nolan, who's the Chair Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Marta, for the summary. It was tense is not quite the right word to describe the meeting, but there were issues raised that I think we need to be paying attention to. And Marta and I have talked about this during the coming year to 18 months. But I do want to applaud Marta and the WPES folks for reviewing specifically each of the concerns or issues raised by the committee and preparing, they're in the process of preparing direct response to the impact it would have if we made the change that the individual member of the committee or several voices on the committee had wanted. But I support Marta's decision to leave the budget proposal as it's been submitted, but also follow up on the non-monetary aspects of the recommendations that committee members made. I think it's important to recognize that this council established a policy that the rate increases in WPES should not exceed 8%. And the budget proposes a, Marta, help me, 10-point-something% raise in the tipping fee, but only a 5% raise in the regional system fee. That, when combined, results in a fee increase of 9%, which I do my arithmetic pretty well, and I understand 9 is higher than 8%. However, the committee understood and absorbed that WPES, through its zero-based budgeting approach, already included, embedded within the proposal it submitted to the chief operating officer, and she advanced to us, significant reductions and tightenings of expenses. And the committee couldn't identify more that they were willing to support to achieve an 8% actual increase. So there's work to do ahead, but I support the recommendation that Marta is making.
Great, thank you, Chair. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Wong. I appreciate that, Chair Nolan, the update. I also want to give my plaudits to Dr. McGuire. I know that over the last few years, Metro and WPAS has really tried to increase the rate setting process, our approach to it, and really respecting it as the kind of the utility rate setting process that it is. And I think generally we can all acknowledge that the pinch that Oregonians are feeling with cost of living, with affordability being top of mind, I mean, rates going up is not easy for anyone at all. And so one, want to acknowledge that, and two, to just echo what Chair Nolan just said about the zero-based budgeting and the work that your team has done to try and reorient as much as possible while protecting key and critical services. I do think that is, as far as I've heard from people out in my district, what people are interested in. One of the elements that has been really surprising to me that I would love for you to just shed some light on is with the adoption at the state level of the Recycling Modernization Act, the amount of resources that are going to some of our local jurisdictional partners, but surprisingly, bewitchingly to me, no money coming to Metro as the region's garbage and recycling administrator. So can we talk a little bit about that tension? I think it's important for the council to know, especially because some of the items that we're discontinuing in our budget that is particularly painful to our partners is grant allocations to cities that do very important programs. But can we talk about that a little bit, and additional nuance that might be helpful for us to understand?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and we would love an opportunity to come to a council work session and do a more in-depth presentation on the Recycling Modernization Act. We talked a little bit about it at the March work session. It really is a significant policy shift within the system where producers take responsibility for the management of products at their end of life. And as a part of that, the cost of managing those products is built into the purchase price, which then creates a system for funding those materials at the end of life. As a part of that, local governments will be receiving around $5.4 million to help support local programming, and that's both to local governments and service providers with a focus on waste reduction, contamination education, and some other additional elements. So that is a significant new funding stream that is coming into the system that I think will fundamentally change the landscape. It's quite exciting. Local governments have the opportunity for that funding this year and are entering into contracts to receive that and determine how it will be applied to their jurisdictions. Alongside that, Metro, within the proposed budget, we're continuing our commitment to the per capita grant funding that we provide local governments. It's about $2.2 million, and that's more flexible funding that local governments can use to support their waste reduction programs. So it's a brand new policy, a brand new funding stream, so I'm sure that there'll be learnings along the way, but we would love the opportunity to talk and share more about that programming with you. The reason it's going to local governments and service providers primarily is because that is the scope of their role. It is over collection programs. When we look at the structure of the garbage and recycling system, Metro is really unique in the focus of a regional utility and providing the infrastructure investments and some of the services that aren't provided at the local level. So this is really reflective of local government's oversight over their local collection programs, and that's what the program funding is intended to help support.
Great, thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I just wanted to add two kind of anecdotes to the really good overview of the meeting that you gave. I do believe that it's important, colleagues, to know that it was noticed that every single line item in the budget was a reduction with the exception of the central services share. And the central services share wasn't a hold, it actually went up, and I was asked about that. I said, look, we're not like going out there and doing a whole bunch of new things, but the thing that is new is the ERP, and we absolutely need that backbone in order for this department to have success. So it was understood that that increase has been interrogated by this council and thought about pretty thoughtfully in this fiscal environment. The second thing that's important to know is that there was a conversation that was beginning to take us away from the amount of time that we had to do our feedback activity, and that conversation centered on the changes in operations at Metro South. I do think there are several committee members and other people who we're going to hear from who want to see more details about the numbers for the second half of next fiscal year. So we will be able to revisit that, but I think it's just important to know that we had to prioritize getting the feedback, and that is why that conversation did not continue, because as it was, we barely had enough time for the staff to take the Post-it notes, put it into the Word file, and generate out the report. In fact, they were working under great duress because they wanted 10 minutes. They probably needed 15, and I gave them 7.
We made it work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm liking this new format. I felt like I was at this meeting.
You were practically there.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Craig?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Director.
Dr. Director.
Okay.
Sorry. Ooh, thank you.
Good morning, Acting Council President Wong, councilors, Dr. McGuire for heating up my seat. I appreciate the opportunity to sit in a warm seat, but not a hot seat. Here to give you the update on the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission meeting that occurred yesterday. It's a monthly meeting. I'm Craig Stroud, General Manager of Metro's Venues. Councilor Rosenthal, if I miss anything, please be sure to add. There was a fair amount to cover. Our general meetings include a financial update, reports from the general manager, reports from the directors around their operations, and then any specific active agenda items. Yesterday, we had those standard items plus Travel Portland did a quarterly report on convention sales and their equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. And then Sport Oregon came in and presented on the state of the sport tourism economy in Oregon, and that's the pamphlet that you're all busily reading. As some highlights, I want to start with just some financial highlights. Transit lodging taxes continue to be sluggish. March 2026, collections were 19%, about $165,000 below collections in March of 2025. The monthly shortfall following modest underperformance earlier in the fiscal year further weakens the annual outlook, and as a result, the forecast now anticipates collections to be about 3% or $500,000 below prior year, and 6% or nearly $1 million below budget. Nearly all of the MERC venues receive some form of public subsidy from transit lodging taxes, so it continues to put pressure on the revenue side of the venue budgets. From a financial performance perspective for the Oregon Convention Center, March included a couple of outsized events that just happened to fall in that month. Snowflake, sales kickoff meeting, which is a high-tech meeting, very unusual for the Oregon Convention Center to host a high-tech meeting. We usually do nonprofit association convention business, but that outsized event plus the Oregon International Auto Show boosted year-to-date performance. We're at $5.8 million ahead of last year's pace. We had forecast a challenging year. Snowflake was contracted less than a year from their event date, so we weren't able to incorporate that into the budget. With the boosts of those events, we think that Oregon Convention Center is going to land with a break-even budget for the year. They had forecasts an operating loss, so that's tremendous progress that helps preserve their fund balances and will enable us to work towards bridging through continued weakness ahead. Portland 5, their results softened year over year. That was anticipated. They're more than $500,000 below fiscal 25's revenues. But last year also included Hamilton, the performance of Hamilton and Broadway year to date. So that was known and expected, and we have our eyes on that overall revenue picture. Year-to-date expenses are about $830,000 below budget. So when you take those both into account, softer revenue, less spending, they forecast to end with an operating surplus of about $40,000, which is about on line with what we expected at the beginning of the year. Expo continues to track overall on budget. Revenues are about $700,000 ahead of last year, 14%. Expenses are also trending higher. But overall, between the increased revenues and increased expenses, their net operations are expected to basically break even with no use of fund balance. So we continue to stabilize Expo. For my general manager report, I covered a lot. I think the highlights that I want to just give you are that I report on an Expo Future project as kind of the project sponsor there. And we continue to make progress on elements of that project. The Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee, we're advancing analysis of their recommendations. We're planning to go to community in the coming months and share our results and then engage in planning to advance some of those specific recommendations. The second portion was Hall A is of particular significance to the historic communities. And we have commissioned an engineering study of that hall. We've received back their draft report. It looked at subsurface soil conditions, seismic upgrades, the condition of the building itself, the condition of the systems that support the building. We don't have the final report, but I can tell you that it's technically feasible to separate Hall A from Halls B and C. It will come at cost, and it's basically all the systems and utility of the building is at end of life, and it will need significant investment. But it is technically feasible. So we'll finalize that report, again, go to community, receive input and direction, and then plot a path forward on the future of Hall A at the Expo Center. And then third, we continue to work to resolve the questions that Metro Council and MERC raised at the February 12th joint work session around the sports investments. I expect to come back in the next couple of months with answers to those questions and a recommendation on what the sports investment would look like and how those investments would benefit sports tourism as well as community regular use of the facility. Moving on to the MERC monthly business reports, just some highlights. Actually, one highlight for Oregon Convention Center that just happens to be coincidentally timely is we've been working for more than a year at installing bollards at the main entrances to the Holiday entrance and the Martin Luther King entrance. Those bollards were installed earlier this week. It's completely coincidental to what happened at the athletic club in downtown Portland where a vehicle entered that building. But it is an important safety enhancement. But I'd encourage you to go by the Martin Luther King entrance. It's the one in the middle of the building with the large awning that extends out over the sidewalk, and look at the new River Fins bollards. They're not a standard round bollard that you would see in a parking lot. These are much more architectural. They tie into the language of the landscaping in the building so that they're consistent. They have some artistic elements, and each panel has some cutouts in the steel fabrication where there's symbols of Oregon hidden on each panel, one per panel, to give folks just a little fun and delight as they're entering and exiting the building. So an important safety enhancement that also ties right into our message about Oregon.
Question.
Yes, Councilor Simpson.
Those bollards are engineered to stop a car, though. They're pretty.
Absolutely
but
crash.
they stop a car.
The intent is
Yeah.
crash resistance.
They're this long and steel.
Okay.
They're big.
The intent was vehicle intrusion protection,
Very-
presented in a way that's artistic, whimsical, and fun to the space.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure they do what they're supposed to do.
They're going to do what they're supposed
Like,
to
they
do.
can be pretty.
So cool.
As long as they do what they're supposed to.
Whimsical safety.
They're robust.
That's as good as you're going to get from me on the autistic side. Sorry, CPA. Okay, so we then moved into our main presentation, Sport Oregon. The glossy handout that you have in front of you, titled "Inside the Oregon Sports Tourism Economy." They presented on this report, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice. And I would like to schedule Sport Oregon to come in and present this study to you. But in effect, what they are able to tell us is that these studies are done by I think it was Dean Runyon does a study at a national level, but they are not consistently done within states, and there's not a methodology for a state to go do this type of analysis. So they worked with Eco Northwest to put a methodology in place to begin generating forecast economic impacts for sports. And what they looked at is there's spectator sports and there's participatory sports. Spectator sports are your major league teams, your professional teams, your D1 football teams and baseball teams, where there's more spectators that go and observe the sports than are participants. That is different than participatory sports like marathons, where there's not a lot of spectators, it's generally the individuals. You could put youth league sports into that as well. They did not do an analysis of participatory sports. This was focused on spectator sports. And what they found, based on their language, conservative estimates, very conservative estimates, is that spectator sports are at least a $1.72 billion industry to the state of Oregon annually, and that they think the numbers are actually higher, but it's their first step. Generates thousands and thousands of jobs, thousands and thousands, or millions of dollars in taxes, and really creates a sense of place. They're not able to capture the value of the brand these sports bring, but they also were able to report the number of overnight stays that they generate is substantial. So you have the report in front of you. It's got a by the numbers page on page 2 that talks about some of those impacts. I will ask them to come and present so that you have a grounding in this. They were saying this is on par with the wine industry in Oregon, like the economic value. And so I don't know that most of us would have guessed that. And so it is an opportunity and a way for us to lean in. And it directly ties to the work we're doing at Expo Center on the Future Vision. That's more focused on participatory, but it has an economic tourism part of it. So that was the Sport Oregon report. And then Travel Portland report, again, a lot of information. They do this quarterly for us. They provide a quarterly report that I can send you if you're interested, just reach out. But some highlights that I thought were particularly interesting. They had a slide that shows the value of the Oregon Convention Center in the hotel key performance indicators. And what they showed was that when the convention center has a room block of 1,000 or more rooms for a period of time, it boosts the key performance indicators for the hotels significantly. I'll give you an example. Well, first, let me premise. In 2019, over the course of the entire year, when the Oregon Convention Center had 1,000 room nights or larger for a day, the average daily rate was $165 across the region. In 2025, that rate had dropped down to $147. So we're $14 behind 2019. We've not gotten back to our benchmark of 2019. But when you look at the impact of those 1,000 rooms on what it does to overnight average daily rates, occupancy, and revenue per available room, the 3 key performance metrics for hotels, it boosts occupancy by 14% across our hotels. It boosts the average daily rate by $14 across our hotels, and our revenue per room jumps by $24. So these are significant impacts, and it's the baseline to allow hotels. In essence, I think you could distill it down to because business is weak, hotels are not. Their rates are soft. They're not being aggressive in holding or pushing rate, and it's kind of a race to the bottom mentality. And so it shows the value of the convention center in bringing these groups that gives a floor that then the community increases rates and can generate larger economic impact from that base. Another couple of key takeaways, they outlined their program of work for the 3rd and 4th quarter that we're in and just showed the number of outbound sales missions where they're hitting every region of the country, all the major cities, all the major but retail shows where we would attract clients to the state. They're in all of those, so the Oregon Convention Center teams are traveling with them. But the sales effort is robust right now, trying to solidify our pipelines. And then on the EDI front, the really fun thing was Portland Dining Month came back last month. It had been a hiatus for a couple of years. They had 128 participating restaurants. Revenues associated with Dining Month, they were over 1.16 million, so nearly 1.2 million. They believe that number is very low because they only had about 40% of the restaurants reporting information back in their survey. So well received. It's now back. They expect it to continue into the future. And the surveys, both from the restaurant participants and from our community members, was very strong to support that activity. Councilor Rosenthal, did I miss anything of particular importance?
Not of particular importance, but there is one interesting thing. When they were evaluating the sports impact, they did it on the basis of local versus up to 100 miles versus out of state. And just one of the interesting things was the largest input to the state from out-of-state dollars is from the special events such as the WNBA finals, the Olympics, and various special events. And so what that points to is that, of course, regional competitions, and this will apply to some extent also to the kind of sports that we would get in the Expo Center. Regional competitions will bring people in from the state and it won't be just local spending, it'll be out-of-state spending.
Thank you. Yeah, great ad.
Great. Well, I'm happy to report I'm participating in those numbers through playing sports twice a week and also going to dining month. So it's all great news. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're running a little behind, so we're just going to skip communication today, if that's okay. We're going to move into an exec section. So I'm going to adjourn the council meeting. We're going to go into an exec session in room 375. We'll take a 5-minute break. So let's meet there at noon. And the executive session will be held pursuant to ORS 196.66E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for May 12th, 2026 at 10 a.m.